jazzy music a minute ago coming from the video, so I turned that off.
Mr. Washington, this is Brian Brower in IT. If you're watching over the city's YouTube channel, then there's going to be about a 10 to 20
Our applicant has been through this process before, and just want to remind him we are an advisory committee that makes recommendations. We have some minutes to approve, and I believe the three in attendance today were all at that meeting. So does anybody have any comments or revisions or a motion?
I'll move that we approve the minutes of the June 24th meeting.
Do we have a second? Jen, did you second?
Yes, I second it.
Okay. All in favor, let's call names. Jen?
Aye.
Jim?
Aye.
And I will also agree, and aye, so it passes 3-0. We have two items on the agenda today. Item 2A is a conditional use permit 19346, site plan permit 19347, architectural permit 19348, discretionary sign permit 19349, Pico Plaza in and out. We have Jim Lockington representing the applicant today, and I believe Katie Crockett is our planner that will be presenting the project.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner Crandall. This is the second DRSD review of this proposal for a new in-and-out drive-through restaurant at 115 via Pico Plaza. The DRSD previously reviewed this item on June 24th, 2020. This presentation predominantly focuses on the recommendations of, I guess I should ask IT to put up my presentation before I start referring to it. Let's see, is it there yet?
Please, I'm getting it together right now.
Sorry about that. Just jumped right in there.
While he's doing that, Stephanie or Katie, did we have any public comments or letters that we need to disclose?
No public comments on this item.
Okay, very good.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and get started here. There it is. So I'm going to give just a quick brief refresher on the project. Next slide. It's located at the intersection of Avenida Pico and Via Pico Plaza, adjacent to the 5 freeway. It's a general plan designated gateway area, and Spanish colonial revival architecture is required. Next slide. The project includes demolition of these two-story office buildings seen here in the photos. Next slide. The overall project area is 76,509 square feet. After demolition of the existing buildings, a 3,882 square foot drive-through restaurant with an outdoor dining area, parking, and landscape would be constructed. Next slide. As you can see on the site plan, the building is located along the street frontages near the corner, and the outdoor dining area is predominantly located at the corner, creating an inviting street scene. Parking and trash enclosure areas are located to the rear and side of the building. Next slide. At the last meeting, DRSC requested the applicant reconsider on-site circulation, including additional pavement markings and directional signage, which you can see on the updated plan. With a few minor tweaks to the pavement markings, the engineering division is satisfied with the site plan circulation. The applicant has not modified the driveways to be one-way only. They can address specifically why that is. They did speak to that in the last DRSC meeting. But from engineering staff's perspective, the far driveway, and Zach can correct me if I'm wrong, Zach Conson is also on the call, but the far driveway to the right, being enter only, and the left driveway being exit only would make more sense from an on-site circulation standpoint. However, this is not a great solution given the current median blocking left turns from the left-hand driveway out of the site and onto Via Pico Plaza. Which brings me to the DRSC's next recommendation. Next slide. Which was to work with the city to consider the possibility of shortening that center median to allow for left outs from that driveway. At this time, that is a possibility, but Public Works has not yet confirmed. Next slide. DRSC also recommended modification to the towers to make one the primary and one secondary by modifying the height, the design, or both. As you can see, the applicant has incorporated this by making the secondary tower a square tower and slightly lower. Next slide. Additionally, the DRSC commented that the main elevation could be improved by aligning the walls and window spacing on each side of the main tower rotunda, which they have done. Next slide. Another recommendation involving the towers was the tower signage. Previously, both towers were round and had rectangular cutouts to make a flat sign surface. DRSC recommended this be modified so that the signage is complementary of the building architecture and not the other way around. With one tower now rectangular, that issue was resolved, and the applicant now proposes a curved sign that sits directly on the rounded facade of the main tower. Next slide. Additional parking lot landscape was also recommended. Approximately 2,000 square feet of landscape has been added to this revised plan. Additional shade trees have been added, most notably the several Brisbane box trees added along the drive-through queue. Next slide. The DRSC recommended the menu board be modified to appear less modern and more consistent with Spanish colonial revival architecture. That's inherently difficult given drive-thrus were only invented in 1947. At any rate, the menu sign does coordinate with the stucco base and iron detailing consistent with the menu and with the architecture of the building. By comparison, the Starbucks drive-thru down the street has a black metal drive-thru sign. This is a vast improvement from that in terms of consistency with Spanish colonial revival architecture. Next slide. Another recommendation involved the balance of the windows and arches above the windows, or perhaps even adding a shallow colonnade or arcade along the front to mitigate this. The applicant has addressed this with the addition of the stucco detail and the balance of the arch. Next slide. Couple of other recommendations which were incorporated are that all signage include a dimmer so that the sign lighting intensity can be reduced if necessary. I do want to note here that staff just talked to the applicant, and he was under the impression that the design review subcommittee's recommendation at the last meeting was that the red cove lighting, if it were to remain, be on a dimmer. He was not aware that the recommendation was for all signage. If I got that wrong, I apologize. I didn't have time to go back and listen to the meeting again to hear if that to hear what the design review subcommittee's intent on that comment was, and maybe you could clarify that, commissioners, after the presentation. So the applicant hasn't thought through dimming all of the lights at this point. It is a standard condition that we've been applying to most of our master sign programs in the last several years. but the applicant would need to discuss that with In-N-Out. Also incorporated was the recommendation that the crossed palm tree detail on the building be included in the sign program, which it was. Next slide. Recommendations not incorporated are the removal of the red cove lighting, although, like I previously mentioned, the applicant does agree that the cove lighting could be placed on a dimmer. The applicant has also not reduced the number of signs. The existing center identification sign burdens but doesn't benefit In-N-Out's landlord's property. Since it's owned by a different property owner, In-N-Out has no rights to signage on the Pico Plaza Center ID. Next slide. I think that concludes, that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you have of staff. Again, Zach Ponson, I believe, is on the call. If you do have questions related to circulation, traffic, that type of thing. Thank you.
Okay, Jen or Jim, do either of you like to start?
Yeah, I just have a question for our traffic engineers, for our engineering group people. Was there any consideration given to possibly, I know you talked about shortening that median to make that left-hand turn a little easier, and there's no interest in that, and I definitely understand that. I think that was kind of iffy anyway. But is there any consideration for lengthening that median so that people, to discourage that left-hand turn at all? Right now, that left-hand turn would be a little bit difficult. You're kind of almost skirting the edge of that median if you made that left-hand turn out of the northeast driveway, I guess it is. But has there been any thought to lengthen the median so that people just can't do that at all, to help force them go down to the end of the cul-de-sac and come back?
Good question, Jim. This is Zach Ponson with engineering. There is a current city project on paper right now for via Pico Plaza Road that was actually going to extend that median for that exact purpose. The existing development, I believe, is a bank, and people were going out and doing an odd illegal U-turn there. And so the city actually spotted that even before In-N-Out coming out, and was tempted to looking at actually extending that with the upcoming asphalt repair project on that street. And so at this time, since In-N-Out has come in, obviously their drive approach is shifting a little bit and actually making it even more of a likelihood that cars are going to kind of go out and do that odd left around that. And so we are still in conversations with Public Works Director and traffic staff here of what our final design will be. If, will it be better to either lengthen it or shorten it? As of right now, I'm sure In-N-Out would probably prefer us to shorten it so that people can do a left out of either one of the drive approaches. And so that is something we're still looking at right now, whether we'd be supportive of, one versus the other. The current layout where it's just almost exactly right in the middle of the drive approach isn't ideal. And so it almost needs to be moved one way or the other. Where it's at right now is probably the worst case scenario because it leads people to believe that they probably should go out and do this half question mark U-turn type of thing around that island.
Yeah, I think we talked about some of the disadvantages of shortening it at our last meeting, and it'll probably come up in planning too. So I don't want to belabor the point, but no, it would be good to have that information and just maybe as an FYI. I know in the past we've required in some intersections actually installing a stoplight in kind of the biggest impact sort of areas, and something that would require that. So I'm guessing staff is going to have to look at if there was a change in that median, who's responsible for bearing that cost. And I'm bringing that up again because that's something that probably they'd want to see up at the Planning Commission. So that's the only question I had, Bart. I didn't know if you wanted to get into discussion yet, but
not yet. Just questions for staff.
That's it. That's it for my questions then.
Jen, do you have some questions for staff?
On the existing survey map, the existing condition is that there are a few trees on Via Pico Plaza. They are mostly Melaleuca paper bark. I believe there are a few olive trees. I'm not 100% sure. So let me count. So there's 1, 2, 3 before the first.
I apologize for jumping in, but applicant can't hear the speaker presently.
And I can't either, actually. This
Yeah,
is
me neither.
No?
No, it's still pretty quiet, Commissioner Wu.
What happened to it, sir? Because at the beginning, Bart, when we tested it, you can hear me, right?
Yes, we could.
But now you can't?
That was a little better.
It's a little better?
Yeah.
A little bit. You're still very faint.
On Via Pico Plaza, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, maybe 9 existing trees. They're Melaleuca, paperbark, and olive tree. Not 100% sure on the olive tree, but there are many Melaleuca trees. On the proposed landscape plan, a few trees are identified as being removed. The other few trees does not reflect on the proposed landscape plan. I wonder if they're kept or they're going to be removed. Mr. Lockington, can you clarify that?
Yeah, I can't hear you, Commissioner. I'm so sorry. I did not catch any of that. Maybe someone not having mic problems could just restate that so I could address it.
Bart, did you hear me?
I could, he was, Jim, he was trying to find out what trees are existing and remaining. It's not clearly defined on the preliminary planning plan.
So on the preliminary planting plan,
Excuse me, I'm putting in a different mic. Can you hear me now?
yes. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Jim, I cannot hear you. Bart, can you hear me better?
Yes, much better.
I cannot hear you.
And can you hear me, Commissioner Wu?
Hello?
We can hear you, Commissioner.
What the?
So the question, as I understand it, is asking for clarity on the trees to be removed. Is that correct?
It seems to be, yes, Jim.
Okay. So looking at the planting plan, which is on attachment 7, it's sheet 8 of the 24 sheets submitted. At the tree legend, on the right side of that sheet, there is nomenclature for a symbol with dashed lines. That is an existing tree to be removed. So if you look at the plan, you can see those.
Yeah, that's
I don't know that I see at my fingertips, but we're putting substantially more trees on the redeveloped site than are being removed.
All right, I just plug in another external mic. Can you guys hear me now?
Slightly.
Mr. Lockington, can you hear me?
Yes, I do hear you. You're faint, but I can hear you.
Okay. So I apologize for the inconvenience, but my question was on Via Pico Plaza. There are a few street trees. They are Melaleuca and olive trees, I believe. On the demolition plan, we removed 5 of them, but there are 3 other trees. They are not suggested being removed. Neither are they included on the proposed landscape plan. My question is, are these trees, do they stay or do they go away?
I don't know that I can answer that question on the fly, Commissioner. The trees that are proposed for removal should be shown on the planting plan, along with the trees to be.
On the
Sorry?
planting plan, it shows that you're going to remove 5 trees, the first 5, starting from the intersection. But after that, there are another 3 trees. They're not removed, nor they are reflected on the landscape plan. So if you look at the proposed landscape plan, after the first curb cut, there are a few parking spaces perpendicular to Via Pico Plaza. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, then a finger, then 1, 2, 3, 4. And we propose to have 3 trees there. But the existing condition is on the back of the sidewalk, there are already 2 or 3 existing trees there. They're not on this plan, and not showed as being removed either. So I just wonder the status of these trees.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll be able to clarify that for you on the fly here, Commissioner, but I can absolutely get to the bottom of it, review with staff.
Okay, thanks.
And we can certainly have that clarified before Planning Commission. Apologize for any discrepancy there.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. Jim, would you like to make any statement as far as a presentation goes at this time while we're still in the staff presentation section of the meeting?
I don't have any comments on the presentation. I'm happy to comment when we get into our discussion.
Actually, I was Mr. Lockington.
Oh, I'm sorry, the other Jim. I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. My fault for being so informal.
What was the question again, please?
I just wanted to know if you wanted to make any statement or anything as part of the staff and applicant presentation section of the meeting.
Well, I haven't prepared anything. I do appreciate the thoroughness of staff. It looks like we have come to a meeting of the minds on almost everything. We made changes, almost every change suggested or recommended by the subcommittee at our last meeting, and we feel very good about it. Obviously, we still would like to obtain approval of the Cove hidden red LED lights. We're very comfortable with the detail that was put over the windows. And as far as all the signage on dimmers, I think Katie and I perhaps just had a misunderstanding. My understanding of the subcommittee's input at the last hearing was that the LEDs, if they remain, would be on a dimmer, and saying that every sign is on the dimmer might require a little more clarification. I don't know if that simply means the subcommittee is recommending that the wall signs, the 4 wall signs, should be on dimmers, or literally each and every sign. It's an unusual request, one we haven't gotten before. We definitely have gotten input from other bodies at other jurisdictions about making the LED lights dimmable, and that's not a problem at all. So that's really it.
Okay, thank you very much. Katie, let me ask you 2 quick questions. One on the red light in the body of your text. I'm trying to find it. I can't. It said something to the degree that the applicant wanted to keep the red light because it was part of their corporate image. Is that your understanding?
It is. That seems very important to In and Out as a company.
They're taking that position, correct? Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and close the presentation portion. Open it up for public comment, which we don't have the ability to do, and there were no letters. At some point, did one come in from the Historical Society, Stephanie, on this job?
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Crandall, I can speak to that. I apologize. I forgot about that email that was forwarded to the commissioners. I don't actually know if it came from, you know, the Historical Society per se, or right. And he just stated that he was in support of the discretionary sign permit.
Very good. That's what I wanted to get out to the public.
Yeah, apologies.
No problem. Okay, we will open it for discussion. And to start with, I will say I'm very pleased with how the applicant has responded and worked with us to get a project that is ready for the Planning Commission to review. We probably have just some small comments that can be handled between now and then. But Jim and Jen, do you have comments for discussion?
Yes. I'd like to commend the applicant to make this revision. I'm very happy to see this revision. I think you addressed most of the comments we made. So this really, the biggest comment we made was about the building massing, the identical tower. They are willing to change that. I'm very happy about that. Overall, I think with very minor comments on 2 issues, I would support it to go to the Planning Commission. About those items can be discussed on the Planning Commission. The first item is the street trees. We just talked about a few trees that we're not sure about the status. Overall, I believe that we have a very large site, and the old hardscape in front of the building on Via Pico Plaza. I'd like to see the building possibly being pulled back a little bit to accommodate some street trees. Those trees will soften the architecture. I appreciate your effort to add many trees on the backside along the driving. So I'm not asking you to add more trees in the total number. I think if you can move the building backwards a little bit to give some trees, they don't have to be parkway. They can be tree wells. So put some trees in front of the building on the Pico Plaza, and that will be great. Also, consider the 3 trees I just mentioned on the Via Pico Plaza. Right now, in front of the whole project, we don't have street trees. The existing condition is we have a few mature Melaleuca paperbark trees. I'd like to see if we can either on your proposed landscape plan, there are a few trees. We can either keep the existing trees at the backside of the sidewalk, or we move these proposed trees as close as practical to the sidewalk, so provide some shade to pedestrians. So that's my number 1 comment on landscaping. The second comment really is about the signage. I'd like the staff to check with our city attorney. My impression is always when that sign is the red strip light LED light become a part of the company identity, it would be interpreted as a part of a signage. And then we need to apply the signage ordinance to it, see if we can meet that requirement. I'm reluctant to support a red light, strip light on the building as part of the signage. So I'd have the staff to check with the attorney when it goes to the planning commission. That's all. Otherwise, I think it's a great project.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Ruin.
Okay. And I'll throw in my thanks for your willingness to work with us. I appreciate you making the changes you did, and I saw more landscaping in the drive aisles and the trees in the parking lot. So I think that's great. To address some of the things that have been brought up, the dimmer, my recollection with the dimmer did apply to, well, not all the signage, but certainly the main signage, the in and out signage. Maybe you're meaning the dimmer, does the dimmer apply to the directional signage? I don't think that we had any intention for that. But my understanding is the intention was to be able to dim these LED-based signs if necessary. That's kind of a more or less standard thing that we've been starting to do in town, because some of these LED signs can be turned up very bright. They're very strong. So I don't think we've ever actually instituted that. I don't know of a case anyway where we've had to go and say, please turn it down. But the city does want that option in case someone, kind of cranks it up. I know the red light is important to you. I think you heard from us last time. There was certainly some hesitancy. That's up to you to take to Planning Commission. I think we've said what we've said, and you obviously, I think it's pretty obvious you'd like to go and submit that to the Planning Commission. That is of course you're right, but even if we say that we're ready to have this move forward to Planning Commission, doesn't necessarily mean that the members of the DRSC agree with every portion of what you're proposing. I also still have a concern, and I think this will be handled at planning. I have a concern about the sign pollution out front. Certainly not all in and out's fault. There's a mammoth monument sign there with a lot of signage on it. I think about 10 or 12 signs on it already. And then you're talking about adding 3 more, one of them an additional monument sign. So that was a concern I raised last time. I still have that as a concern. So I just don't want you to be surprised going forward if you hear about that from in the future. I'm just seeing if I have anything else. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Once again, I'll also thank Mr. Lockington and his team. That project's come a long ways. I'm really pleased that we were able to work together and refine the application a little bit. I can support this project, but I see some little items. One, the wrought iron details that are depicted on the project, on some of the signs and on the building and whatnot, to me come across a little bit French. So when you do the fabrication and do the shop drawings for the wrought iron work, you might do some refining to those details and work with staff. They're just they're very ornate and detailed, and you could probably find a Spanish colonial revival with something that detailed, but I don't think it's really necessary in this case. Stephanie, jump in, and if you have any comments on these next questions or next comments. You've got the opportunity. I do believe that the red light is definitely corporate image, and I totally appreciate that, and I understand the pressure you are under from corporate to keep it. But for instance, the gas station basically across Pico from you, the standard station was not allowed to have blue around their roof, which they would have liked to have had, which was their corporate color. And that has occurred there and at an ARCO station at another gateway. So it's you have not been singled out for scrutiny as far as a color like that around the eave for consideration. In other words, we've denied it in a number of cases. But your options are, you can hold firm with the red light and present it to Planning Commission, in which case I think one of three things can happen there. Either the project could be denied and appealed to council by you. It could be approved by Planning Commission, which I think is unlikely. Or most likely is it would be approved with a condition of approval that it be a white light. And the only way that would occur is at the meeting if the applicant agreed that to get their approval, they would be willing to accept a condition of approval that it be a white light. There's one other, another option would be you take it to Planning Commission and accept the white light at this point in time, in which case it could be probably approved at the Planning Commission level, and there would be no reason for an appeal or anything at that point. There's a third option, and this is what I need Stephanie to, I brought up the question earlier. If you were to bring it to Planning Commission with a white light, you would, best case scenario, be approved, and you would be entitled at that point. It wouldn't have to go to City Council level. You could make an application which would probably go to the zoning administrator to request that light be red, in which case the zoning administrator could say, probably being that they couldn't make the fine, could say no. You would be able to appeal that one item past Planning Commission directly to City Council. And if you queried City Council ahead of time, you would be able to probably obtain a good feel if it would be worthwhile to do that or not. So do you see any other alternatives, Stephanie or Katie?
This is Katie. I would imagine, I don't see any other alternatives necessarily. I would imagine, though, if the applicant proceeds forward with the red LED cove lighting and the Planning Commission does not see fit to approve that and instead puts in a condition of approval that it either be removed or that it be white, I would think that then the applicant would just appeal it, appeal the decision to the City Council. I did want to clarify, though, the question on that Commissioner Wu stated regarding that the red LED, we should check with the city attorney if it should be included. It was included in the master sign program. The difficulty for staff comes because there is no mention of this type of lighting necessarily in the sign regulations. And so I was looking for some direction from any commissioners on how that would be included in the signage, or if, because it's not in there, it should be considered prohibited.
Okay, Katie, my interpretation, which is strictly mine, and is that it is a wall color. Whether it's paint, whether it's light, whether it's even if it was ceramic tile, using the corporate color would be something we have not done, we have not allowed, and so I think it would have to be incorporated in the signage quantity, and I think this would exceed that, particularly if it's light where you can't control the spread of it that well. But that's a personal opinion. Jen and Jim, do you either have an interpretation on that?
Yeah, I'd like to chime in. I would consider the red LED part of the signage. Mr. Lockington, this is not to discourage you, but to prepare you. Over many years, it's very rare that a chair would lay out the strategy for an applicant. We're really trying to go out of a way to help you here. But do understand that now you already have 3 commissioners here as a reservation on the signage, so prepare for that, and that's all I can say.
Okay, Mr. Lockton, I saw your square light up a couple of times during the conversation. Do you have anything you'd like to jump in and say?
Oh, that was probably because I have to pick up my phone and press it against my ear when Commissioner Blue is talking, so it probably made a little noise and my ear lit up. But no, if you gentlemen would, get through all your comments, perhaps I'll respond to a few of them at the end, if that makes sense. But obviously we're happy with the direction that this discussion is going. There just happens to be a few items that we're still not 100% aligned on.
Certainly. So I will commit that I am ready to take the position of moving this along to Planning Commission, and having you work with Katie on the landscaping issues that Jen had mentioned and the other items that Jim Rulin had mentioned. The one thing I think would be beneficial, because during these times of the pandemic, et cetera, all of the drive-through businesses, including your facility out there on Ortega Road and what is that?
Antonio.
It would be Antonio as you cross Ortega. That one and our new Chick-fil-A are having phenomenal popularity and having to deal with a whole lot of traffic. So I think if you have a plan of how your staff would deal with that, if you open before the pandemic's gone, we can always have another one. That would help along, I think, the other commissioners at the commission level. I was looking at the site plan, and you, on those other sites, bring employees out to take orders from cars, etc. If you were to come down via Pico Plaza on the and go in the first driveway and turn on the first aisle to get to the drive-through, it's only one-sided parking. It's not two-sided. And I was curious, can you make a guess of how many of these parking spaces will be used by employees? Mr. Lockington?
Sure. Yeah, normal business operation, the staff's between 10 and 15 per shift with 3 shifts per day.
Okay, so if they were to park in the head-on parking spaces that face Pico Plaza, you could do some double stacking in that aisle before they go into your designated drive aisle. So that's the kind of thing just have for discussion when we get to the next level, because I'm sure there will be concern. I don't know, Zach, do you have any comment on something like that?
Yes, this is Zach. Interesting question. That's actually a pretty neat idea, to be perfectly honest, because one of the things me and Nestor, the traffic engineer, were looking at on this latest submittal was you guys requested a keep clear on the I'll call it the easternmost drive approach. And me and Nestor actually thought it would be a good idea to actually make that keep clear all the way to the first stalls, if that makes sense, to make it a little bit bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So that cars, if there are stacking behind a lot further than the drive-through, so that cars can actually make that turn. We do have some concerns that bigger vehicles can't actually make that radius. And so your idea of double stacking with on-site was something that we were considering making a condition of approval, that in the event that stacking does start going out further than the drive-through, that In-N-Out agrees to send a staff member out there to direct staff or direct vehicles to stack on-site, kind of where you're talking about. And that double stacking, I don't see, right now off the top of my head, I'm not seeing too many issues with that.
I
long
think
as we
you
make-
probably get 7 cars in there pretty comfortably, but if you could just work with the applicant and use that as a tool before the planning commission level, that'd be wonderful.
And we could add that in as part of the conditions as one of the possible solutions to consider, similar to what we've been doing on all the other projects recently. We've included, similar, examples of solutions, but not all of them. And we could list that as one of the preferable solutions. And Katie, I mentioned this to Katie just briefly. One thing, how I was mentioning on that radius turn into the drive aisle or into the drive-through lane, that landscape strip kind of pokes out there quite a bit, and the latest site plan shows some paint striping in there. Me and Nestor were kind of looking at that and almost thinking that unfortunately, some of that landscape island should maybe be cut back even more so that it is just paint in that area, so that these bigger cars can make that radius and come in. And because ultimately, if we do have double rows of stacking here, that is a hard turn to make. And ideally, not all cars need a 48-foot, or 24-foot radius, but a 48, not all cars can make that radius turn without kind of swinging wide to get into the drive-through. So there is some issues with double stacking in there, but as long as we make that keep clear area a little bigger than what's shown on the current site plan, so that vehicles can still, people who are dining in can still exit that area maybe, and they're not all forced out the one exit. Or it also helps with the swinging wide. So long story short, I don't really see a big issue on it. We can probably add a condition that that's a preferable alternative to stacking on site. But I did want to mention that we were looking at, Nestor and I, we were looking at that landscape island at the entry and kind of hoping it can get a little smaller.
Okay.
And to help with the radius is getting in there.
I think the commission would be very open to anything to efficiently make the circulation work. So that would be great if you can work with Katie and the applicant's team and resolve that. Okay, so are we in concurrence that we move this forward? I know Jim's on a short clock tonight.
I'll just give a quick word, and the short answer is yes, I'm in favor of moving forward to Planning Commission. I will say, because you reminded me, I meant to write this down and I didn't. Regarding the parking, I know that Starbucks obviously and for instance Chick-fil-A has not only the drive-through but also an app where you can do a quick pickup. And I've been noticing with those, there's a lot less wait time, a lot less traffic going on, a lot less idling, and it does reduce the length of those drive aisle lines. So I don't know if you already do that or plan to do it, but at the commission level, I think there's going to be some real interest in what are you doing about apps? What are you doing about people being able to just come in and sit there, wait for their food for 3 minutes and then they're gone. And they can turn off their cars and they don't have to be idling. There's going to be a real interest in that as well. And that might be something that could mix with the double stacking or be some, be yet another tool to use in dealing with the parking math and how you're laying things out. But I do think people are going to want to know, are there going to be people coming up looking for an app delivery? And if not, there's going to be some question of why not, because that's getting to be a pretty standard thing now. So, but other than that, yes, I say let's move forward to the Planning Commission.
Do you concur, Jen? Okay, Mr. Lockington, did you want to respond to any of the comments, or do you understand them and ready to move this thing along?
Sure. Yeah, I do appreciate the sort of the discussion of options regarding the red LED light. I occupy the side of the table that I occupy. I'm kind of scratching my head why it's such a big deal. to get the LED approved. It's not prohibited by your code. It's not considered signage under the code. You know, we would like it. We're probably going to continue to press to get it. I understand that we may not get it, but it's important to us. We would hope that, you know, a company that's coming to invest in your community and will be feeding your community, I would hope that we get some consideration, especially after all of the great collaboration that we've done so far on this project. Going down the list here, I don't want anyone to have false hopes about us moving the building. At this stage in the development, the location of the building is fixed. There isn't a lot of wiggle room in the north-south direction to move that building back, so we will be presenting the building sited as it presently is to Planning Commission. Some of the comments about the ornamental iron, very easy to refine that further. Those aren't a problem. The observation of the pandemic popularity of In-N-Out, I think it just goes to show that we are an essential business. We're feeding community members in dozens and dozens and dozens of Southern California communities, and we're an option where, you know, some places aren't an option anymore. So the idea of doing some contingency planning for overstack, that's not a problem at all. We do that as a matter of course, both for our grand openings, because they tend to be well attended, and we have to have contingency plans that are well thought out and thought through with city traffic. So that's not an issue at all. Can definitely prepare something to be put in the staff report for Planning Commission in our presentation. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'm sure we can address all of the other minor comments that were presented here today with a package presenting to Planning Commission. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Jim. So we are in concurrence to move this along, and I want to just also agree with Commissioner Wu that the reason I gave you your options was to just once again make you understand we're here to help you get this thing processed and through the system. So congratulations, and we look forward to seeing you at the commission level.
Likewise, thank you all, commissioners. Thank you, staff.
Okay, our next item, do we have David yet on? We do. Our next item is item 2B, Minor Cultural Heritage Amendment 18572, Conditional Use Permit Amendment 19116, Minor Exception Permit 2249, Nomads Deck Extension, and David Carrillo is our planner on this one.
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners. IT, can we get the PowerPoints? Do you guys hear me?
Yes, David.
Okay. All right.
One moment, David.
Oh, yeah. Great. Let's get started. Next slide. So yeah, the project is at 102 Avenida Cabrillo. It's the Nomads site here, highlighted in the light blue. Some background, this is also where the Nomads Hotel operates. It's under the same ownership. So the building at 101 behind 102 is where the hotel is, as well as the main restaurant portion of it. And then on 102 is the current outdoor seating where we have an existing deck. Highlighted in yellow is a adjacent alley. In blue, it's El Camino Real, and then we have Del Mar on the red. So that kind of shows its relationship with the T zone. Next slide. So they're proposing to expand seating or expand the deck southward to accommodate 16 seats, 16 outdoor seats. What you see here in front of you is the temporary deck they have now. This is done through a temporary outdoor operating permit in response to COVID-19. So essentially it'd be similar to that. However, it'll be raised to match the height of the existing deck to the right. Next slide. So here's the proposed plan. The highlighted portion is where the proposed deck would be. Part of their proposal is to maintain the existing king palm trees out there. There's a total of 3. So they'll be cutting out through the deck to allow them to, vertically penetrate and through the deck. And there are plans to, again, keep them. However, during construction, the applicant did mention that there may be the possibility that one of them be removed just due to its height. It may not work. So we did talk about that, and replacement would be with the same species, king palms, which is one that species that is supported by the Downtown Paseo plan. Something else that's going on here, we call out 283 square feet of vertical landscape wall. So I'll show you in the next slide what that looks like, but that's running along the south side of the proposed and existing deck. It's kind of hard to note here. Next slide. So here's some information on the landscaping. So landscaping, the proposed landscaping consists of that vertical wall. It's down at the bottom of the proposed deck. That'll consist of succulents. You can see an example up on top. We have some vines being proposed adjacent to the existing trash enclosure, and that's to address visual impacts, right, to customers that'll be out there, as well as to help reduce any odor, if any, from the trash enclosure. We do have some drought-resistant landscaping being proposed to the left of the trash enclosure as well. In the staff report, I do explain how the city, through a conditional use permit, we can give credit to vines for projects to be able to meet required landscaping. They're not proposing or requesting a CUP for that. Without approval of vines or credit for vines, they do not meet the landscaping requirements, and I do outline the square footage and areas in the staff reports. However, the code does also allow staff or the city to require full compliance or partial compliance whenever we have a discretionary project before a zoning administrator or the planning commission. So since we have that in place, the staff does feel comfortable with the proposed landscaping. Technically, they are providing the amount of landscaping that is required if credit were given. What this achieves as well is, we're meeting the goals of the Downtown Paseo plan, which is to activate the adjacent alley. So we do feel like, in combination with the urban open area credit that we do get for mixed-use properties, that we can support the proposed landscaping. Next slide. Up above are some examples on the proposed elements. So the top left, we see the examples of the removable tables and chairs. So pretty simple, like patio-style tables and chairs that would be removed once that space is not being used. The guard, wood post, and wire picture you see up on top is what's out there now. They're proposing to match that. Staff does support that with some changes. I'll mention in a few minutes. And then also string lights. These here are not compatible, all right? They're not fully shielded, so that is a recommendation from staff that we modify the string lights to completely shield on the sides as well, and that'll help direct light downward to the ground. And we did provide an example in the staff report as to what the applicant can use for other for lights that we have supported in the past. Next slide. Here's a close-up of the current temporary deck, just to give us an idea. So you see how the palm trees are a little low. So this is where the applicant did, mention that it is possible that we remove the king palms to accommodate and replace again with the same species. One recommendation as well is that they submit a preliminary landscape plan for review by the city's landscape consultant for feedback on, how, if possible, how to preserve these trees, or any other feedback on as to what species to use or any other methods, including the vertical landscaping that's proposed. Next slide. So the left picture here is a photo taken from Avenida Cabrillo, looking north up the alley. So as I mentioned, this is part of, it's an area that's within the downtown sales plan. We do envision that alleys be improved with certain pedestrian-oriented elements. One of them being wall art, and that's in the form of murals, any tile, etc. So staff is recommending that the applicant consider using this wall here to the right as an opportunity to have some wall arts. So this alley, I don't believe, has gone through many improvements here. One of the goals here is to eventually remove the overhead utilities and go underground, as well as add different pavements as well. So we are looking forward to that. Next slide. So these are recommendations. I won't go through all of them. We do have some or all of them in the staff reports. One notable recommendation is from the engineering division. So there is a concern, given that the new deck would be replacing or going over existing permeable area. There's a concern with drainage. So the applicant, it's listed here as a recommendation, but really it's more of a requirement. They will be required to submit a WKMP form to go ahead and review the water quality side of that and make sure they address that. So that concludes my presentation, and we unfortunately don't have the applicant with us today.
Okay, Jen and Jim, do either of you have questions for David?
Yeah, I have a little question. I know that this particular application is for work being done at 100, at the 100 address. But if they do an improvement or include landscaping at the 101 address, would that count to the say the square footage for landscaping, for instance? Would that count on this application?
I believe all landscaping is, unless I'm missing something, is in the 102 address. But it would. Oh,
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong thing. Yeah. So transpose what I said. The application is for the 102 address, but if they put in some landscaping, for instance, at the 101 address, we could count that towards this application, the square footage of landscaping, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, great. And that's my only question.
Commissioner Wu.
I have any question. Just to get a clarification of Commissioner Rooney's question. These two lots will be considered as one project when we calculate the landscape area, right? David?
Zen, I'm sorry. We're having trouble again.
Can you hear me now?
A little better.
Just to confirm what you, the answer you gave, Chair ruling or Commissioner ruling, these two projects will be considered one, almost like a lot tie project with a lot tie. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Wu.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's not something we are making our decision today on, but the first exterior deck is 16 seats granted by right, correct?
Correct.
Do they have any other parking waivers or limitations on what they have currently?
No, they currently meet parking requirements with the 10 spaces they have out there.
Okay. And this is going to Planning Commission?
It'd be zoning administrator.
Okay, since that's the case, I am going to, I'll do it during discussion. Okay, let's close the presentation portion. Open it up to public. Were there any letters or public response received, David?
No public comments.
Okay, so we will open our discussion period. Jim and Jen, I'm concerned, since this is going to zoning administrator, that we make sure we get this right. And we don't normally talk about parking at design review. But this is more for just a temperature reading of 3 commissioners. But here's a restaurant that's already been given by right 16 seats for outside dining, which we give to every restaurant. And now they're asking for an additional 16 seats with no additional parking. So in effect, they have received 32 seats without any parking. And I can't believe, if we set that precedence that it's a parking waiver, we can't sustain that for all the restaurants we've got in town. We can't just give them 36. So I would recommend the zoning administrator, as far as an individual goes, that they need to find and purchase a parking agreement from somebody, even if it's from the city on the city lot, which is adjacent to them, the 3 spaces, rather than granting a waiver, which gives them 36 seats with no additional parking for a restaurant. Had it been going to the commission, we could have a big long talk about that, but we're not going to have that opportunity.
We get, in the city, we get, is it 16 seats outside by right? So without any parking issues. So
additional parking.
So basically, they're getting 16 more seats and asking for 3 parking waivers to accommodate those. Yeah, usually this is something, because the Planning Commission is also the Traffic Committee, this is something that would go through the Planning Commission because it's a whole T-zone issue. I'm a little, let me ask, this is, there's an amendment to the original CUP that's part of this. So an amendment to a CUP can go through the ZA and not the Planning Commission?
Correct. There's a specific, there's a section of the code that talks about the review process for amendments, and when it can be done administratively, if there are insignificant modifications, or it can go through ZA if it's significant without any public concern. And then lastly, significant with public concern would go to Planning Commission. So
I will, I'll give my opinion on this, and this is based on the history we've had for many years with how we've, with the use of this discretion. This is on a Paseo, and we've got our Paseo plans, and it's in the T-zone, and it is, and with this particular business, those three things put together, I think, maybe even individually, but certainly put together, it gets into that area of, hey, this is more of something that does have a public interest, that there could be a controversy about it. I guess it's the ZA's call, or the head planner's call on whether it goes to the ZA or the Planning Commission, but we're talking about giving away 3 parking spaces, and that kind of thing has always been a big deal too. So it would probably be safer to go through the Planning Commission. So I'll put that out there as one Planning Commissioner's view on this. Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable because, as you say, Bart, with these three extra spots, by granting that by right, how does that affect other businesses? Are we being fair to other businesses, particularly in this area? It's not just sort of off in the boonies. It's in an important area. I'm glad his business is good for him, but it's yeah, I think probably sounds like at least 2 of us on design review have concerns about not seeing the details of what supports the reasoning, the justification for granting 3 extra spaces there. So
it almost seems like we've taken the ordinance, which is 16 by right, and have changed that to 32.
Yeah, and you got to have a reason for it. You can't just do it. You have to, like, say, there's some huge constraint that they can't get around without it, and it's not fair to them to not have the waiver or something like that.
And it is fair to everybody else.
Right. And so far I don't see that with the parking, right?
Jen, you want to make a comment? You're muted right now, Jen.
You're not muted, but we can't hear you. I can't even hear you a little bit.
Hello?
That we can hear you a little bit now, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. As a planning commissioner and a member of general public, I have serious concern about this parking issue. Especially given the fact that, well, a year ago I enthusiastically supported conditional use permit. And they're coming back, given the recent history that they openly defied state and county mandate on public health issue. That's one reason. And secondly, this, as Bart said, this would set a precedent for many other businesses. I believe that this issue should go to Planning Commission. That's my comment on parking issue. I understand today we can only touch on that. We're talking about design. That's my comments on the parking issue. Now, if I can go to the design issue, I'm adamant that this design to meet the landscape percentage requirement. They take some out. They take some trees out. I can give them. Cut them some slack on the vertical walls. I can give them 50% credit. For if they are mature trees, I can count the canopy area. However they do it, they can change a few parking space into pervious surfaces. And I like to see them to meet that requirement. That's about it.
Okay, let's see. Who's got a good memory here? Did we open it up to discussion, or are we still in presentation?
I I think we're still in present questions is really where we are. So
Okay, we've made those comments. Let's go ahead and close the presentation.
Commissioner Crandall, so
Certainly, David.
before we move on, I don't know if it's appropriate right now, but I do have a comment on just based on the your guys' comments on parking and your feeling on it. Well, one, I do appreciate you guys letting me know because we would consider that too, right? And making that determination, whether it has some potential for public concern. But I do want to call out and read a section of the code as well that can potentially exempt them from meeting parking requirements, and that's due to the fact that we're talking about an outdoor dining area. So this is in our special use section 17.28.205 and reads parking requirements for outdoor dining facilities located within MU3A and MU3CBA zones may be exempt by the review authority if the following findings can be made. 1, off-street public parking is available within a block of the restaurant. And 2, the outdoor dining facility contributes and enhances the village pedestrian atmosphere in the architectural overlay district it is located in by incorporating facades and or plazas that are specifically designed for outdoor dining facilities. So the reason why we have not gone that route yet is because of finding number 2, right? They're not incorporating a paseo or a plaza, right? That would be specifically designed for that outdoor dining area. But they do have the opportunity to consider that and maybe redesign the project to give us a plaza that would connect and interact better with the pedestrians along Avenida Cabrillo. So I just wanted to throw that out there. That is.
Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no limit? They can have 100 seats with no parking?
That's a good question. Doesn't specify the number of parking spaces, but I think, through the discretionary process, we can definitely consider that. But there's no threshold called out.
It almost sounds like this came before the granting of 16 tables without any parking. And this was never taken off the books.
There's also the question of when you say parking is available, does it mean that there is just, non-red striped curbs within a block? Or if there's actually, in a realistic way, parking available, which we know that's not always the case there. So I don't know if they mean in a practical way or just a red stripe way.
I can comment on that as well. When looking at the findings for parking waivers within the downtown parking study area, one of the findings is that based on our parking studies that there's no that the occupancy rate of the area does not exceed 90%, right? It doesn't, a finding is not, public parking is available. That's not a finding. It's a little bit more specific, and it does call out the occupancy rate, 90%. You have areas outside of downtown where the finding is different, and now it's similar to this one where it says public parking is available. So what we've understood of that is, just simply is there parking? Are there opportunities for parking within a block for these customers? And since it's not specific, like in downtown where they're asking for an occupancy rate.
If David, if that's true,
Mm-hmm.
why are you guys asking for a parking waiver?
Because they're not incorporated. We don't believe they meet finding number 2 for this one to be exempt from parking requirements. So that's why we're asking them to. That the only way to do it is to go through the parking waiver process or provide them on site.
Okay, well, I think you've heard from us that we feel this is sensitive. It's a very I would think other restaurants in the area could be up in arms if it's granted without full review. So we'll let that be what it is. You've heard our comments on that. So let's close presentation, open public comment. No public comment. Let's open discussion. As far as what we're here today for, the whole look to me is, and there's two ways to look at this. It looks like a fiesta, which is great, area that they're having an event, kind of atmosphere, outside dining, great. But it doesn't look permanent with the way it's built. It looks like it's put up for a fair or whatever. That's not precluded from being the case. But it might be a little more substantial and all if possibly the poles were designed a little thicker with a lantern on top. But they could still have the string lighting. But in 2 years, I believe it's going to look like a holdover from the coronavirus dilemma we've got going. And I would like to see it just a little more permanent looking, that wouldn't require as much maintenance. I like the idea of staining it. That's great. I think David's correct there, but the poles and all, I'd like to see a little more done with them. And also the lighting looks, no matter how you do those lights, unless they're from a substantial column or from a building, come across temporary. We use the same kind of lighting, I think, down at the, what was it called? The OC, one down by the...
OC Fresca.
Yeah, OC Fresca, we use the lights, so I'm not opposed to the lights themselves. But, and I think that would be more in keeping with the design guidelines. I mean, we are in the architectural overlay zone. So I think we want to be a little bit more permanent looking, if possible. That's my only comment on the architecture and design. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, I got a few things. Bart, I agree with you. It does have that, not that it looks bad, but it does have that temporary look, kind of like, basic, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And it's an architectural overlay area. I know that their current patio is kind of similar, which is problematic in its way. I think often we might want something like this to have a, oh boy, I got a block on it now, not an awning, but a
trellis?
The trellis, yeah, like a trellis, a kind of Spanish colonial revival looking trellis or something like that. There's not much here that speaks and says you're walking down a paseo with Spanish colonial revival architecture. Staining it, adding, say, decorative elements or finials to the top of the poles. Those are nice ideas. Definitely a positive direction, but I wonder if that's enough. You were talking about one of the findings was for parking, for instance, was that it would, it increases the paseo, the walkable environment, that kind of a thing. I don't know that this does that, even if they were to do these things and to stain it. We'll get into landscaping in a minute, but if I'm just looking at this and I'm thinking of the vision we have for the paseo areas, which we're a long way from that vision now, but we've got to start somewhere. We actually have started in a couple places. We've asked for some things that people have grumbled at, but have been very positive in that very small area. So this is kind of, just one of those next step things, how we do things incrementally. And I don't know that this would be an improvement to that, architecturally, kind of per, similar to Bart's concern. So that's one concern I have. I think Commissioner Wu talked about he wants more landscaping. I kind of agree. They're asking for about half of the landscaping that that we would want. And these are small lots, narrow lots, zero setback, that kind of a thing. But there are some creative things that can be done. They're doing a little bit of that. They've got the succulent wall, but we've got this whole sort of blank, fairly ugly wall that's the side of the building on, it's 101, I think, which is why I asked that question. Yeah, building 101. And there's no, staff has recommended that some wall sconces for lighting go up there, which I think is a good recommendation, but the applicant hasn't agreed to that, at least not yet. But there could be vines there, it's like we've seen with Pet Boys on North El Camino Real. There was actually concern there that those would never grow, and they have to keep cutting them back because they're doing just fine. There could be, I've seen people put kind of wall planters on, so you can put in a wall planter and have something hanging over, and that would start to, brighten that paseo as well. So there's actually, I think, some square footage that could really be used along that wall for planting and other things that would make that paseo nicer and maybe not be too expensive if we're just talking about vines and planters. So I do think we can probably increase that square footage area and make that paseo area nicer, both through that and looking at another piece of the architecture. And just touching again on what we were talking about previously, I was not saying this, but Commissioner Wu kind of said it for me, but it is a concern about the applicant's behavior during the COVID crisis. Someone who I think has actually made a great contribution to our city in many ways, but there is some concern about that, and I don't want to kind of paint outside the lines for what we're doing here, but because of that and the questions that raises about them fulfilling their conditions of approval, and now kind of a track record or history, that raises a concern of, do we want the ZA to kind of start to get into that a potential quagmire there? It's another reason to send it to another body. So yeah, those are all concerns. I think. By the way, is it Gabriel who makes the judgment on whether it goes to GA or planning? Is it his discretion?
Just to jump in, Commissioner Rulin, that's only with regard to the conditional use permit amendment. So there are multiple applications that are being proposed. The minor cultural heritage permit, according to the zoning code, is a zoning administrator level decision. So if you were to suggest that this be elevated to the planning commission, what I would recommend is including something within the minutes where you're recommending that the city planner make the determination that this is a significant amendment to the CUP, so that it should be elevated to the planning commission. And once that CUP amendment gets elevated to the planning commission, the rest of those applications would get elevated as well.
So I definitely recommend that we do just that and add that to the minutes so that we can formally recommend that, because it sounds like we all think that that's a good idea. So that is, let's see, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but the recommendations that staff made, I think, are all good. But obviously there's some additional things that I think would bring this, would make this more appropriate for the paseo, and I even think this might be something we want to have come back, depending on other changes that are proposed for this outside patio. So, all right, that's it for me.
Commissioner Wu?
Yes, can you hear me?
Just.
Okay. I think I've talked about some my comments on the landscape. Another idea is perhaps on the wall next to the public parking, they can have some planter or pots there and at about the height of the railing, and then let them jump over the railing. So from the parking lot, it will be better looking. That's all. I've stated that I'd like to see the landscape area to meet the requirement. And I will support a recommendation from this body that the waiver, the whole change is a significant change, to the original CUP, and that should be sent to Planning Commission.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would agree with it. I think we could get into, we can provide a lot of cover for staff and who not by making these sensitive projects come through us and review them. And I think this is one of those cases where they're asking for basically every square foot they can get. Had they could have probably met the landscape requirements by having 12 additional seats or whatever, rather than filling the whole area. So I think that it needs a little more review, and I think if in fact it's determined that it's a major CUP, I think it would automatically come back through here and to commission level. So I would agree with Jim that I think that's the direction we need, or the recommendation we need to make to staff. So are we in concurrence on that? Commissioner Rowland?
Yes, I agree.
Commissioner Wu?
Yes.
And I would concur with that. I wish the applicant had been here to help David explain the project, but I think the applicant needs to hear our concerns so he can address them. So I hope he reviews the video, and David can eloquently describe what our concerns were. Okay, thank you, David.
Hey, Commissioners, did I, just so I'm understanding, did we want to see this come back a second time?
I think so, yes. But it may come back in a different form if I don't know if it's Cecilia or Gabriel decides that it's a major CUP change and it is sensitive, a publicly sensitive project. So yes, we would hope it comes back.
Got it. Thank you, Commissioners.
Chair Crandall, just a question for clarification. So, regardless of who is the ultimate review body for this application, just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, but we are requesting that this come back for a second architectural review before the design review subcommittee. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then my follow-up question to that, based on the direction that we received to ensure that there's continuity in the DRSC members, and, Commissioner Rulin is here really more as, to help us out with in and out since he reviewed that before. Would we like to have Commissioner Rulin participate on the next review for nomads?
Yeah, I'm afraid probably so, but I'm sorry we don't have Blackwell for the landscaping issue, and I knew this would probably happen if he didn't. Blackwell didn't make this meeting, so yes, I think it's probably appropriate to stay with the same members.
Yeah, for continuity's sake, I have no problem following up with this whenever that happens. So.
Okay, thank you.
But I do want to make sure the applicant realizes I love the use. Like I say, it's kind of a fiesta area, whatnot, so it just needs to be thought out a little more. So thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is new business. In your personal notes, Stephanie, I'd really like to see us revisit those codes either informally or with a study session on this particular project, the waivers and the sections that we just talked about. And then also on the lighting being signage, et cetera, we need to work on a clarification at some point on that. So when time permits, we should visit those items. And not necessarily here, but at the commission level.
Yeah, and that might be a question for Mal too. I mean, in this case, the applicant was very clear that this is corporate branding on the one hand. On the other hand, it's not signage, quote unquote. So we'll have to see what Mal says about that too.
I think we've been through it. I think, did you present the signage study session, Stephanie, or?
No, that wasn't me.
Okay, they did a real good job about certain things not being like the golden arches. You can, if you don't want them, you don't have to have them. You know, but at what point it is subtle enough that you do? It's an ongoing issue. So I think we do need to be consistent with all our applicants, and I think the position we took today was consistent with what we've done in the past. Okay. Old business. None. Oral and written communications. We have any? Stephanie's the only one, last man standing. Okay. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
I'll move we adjourn to the regular meeting of the Desired Use Subcommittee to be held Wednesday, July 20. Whoop. Look at the minutes. Sorry.
September 9th.
I will move that we adjourn to the next regular meeting of the Desired Use Subcommittee held Wednesday, September 9th, 2020 at 4 p.m. via teleconference, as the August 26, 2020 meeting was previously canceled.
Second.
A second by Wu. All in favor, just raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Rulin says aye. Commissioner Wu says aye. Passes 3-0. Thank you very much, and thank you for being patient, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're 10 minutes early, Jim.
All right.